We just live right now, man. It's going down, excited for the season. You know, we coming off a playoff win. I mean, you know, we had a couple wins.
Hello and welcome to Deer Diaries, a Milwaukee Bucks podcast presented by us, the staff of Brew Hoop, back for one more edition of the season preview series of podcasts. We have gone through pretty much the entire staff of Brew Hoop and beyond, but I would be remiss if we did not close everything prior to the Kyle Carr interview, which will be coming out shortly, with the last but certainly not least member of Brew Hoop, the newest member of Brew Hoop, bringing a little bit of international flavor to a largely American staff. It's Jack Trehearne. Jack, how are you doing this evening? This
Great,
morning,
right?
I guess. Sorry, it's this morning by you. Sorry, this will take some time for me to get used to, folks.
Nah, thanks for having me. First podcast I've ever done. So, a little bit nervous, but see how we go here.
It's connection's great, audio's great, video's great. I think we're off to a good start. We certainly can't mess it up at this point. I appreciate you making the time to be able to come on. I think this is awesome that we've gotten the chance to talk with everybody, and for you as the newest member of the staff to inject some new ideas, give a little new energy for us. So I'm looking forward to that. Before we get started though on the questions, for listeners or even readers, viewers who may have missed your introductory post when you got introduced to the site about a month ago or so, why don't you give some background as to why you, an Australian, are a Bucks fan? Not saying that's like a weird thing, but just what was your path to this podcast studio this evening?
Yeah, it is a interesting path. There was not like just like a definitive moment where it's like, all right, I'm a Bucks fan, and I've been asked about this sort of before, and it's just like I think it sort of just happened over time, and I can't really remember when that exact moment was, but I graduated high school in 2018, and I was working night shift. The next year, I was working night shift at a supermarket here. It's called Woolworths. We call it Woolies. And I was just stacking shelves. And so during the days, I didn't have anything to do. And I reckon I just hopped on a illegal streaming site one time and picked a game. The Bucks were playing. This would have been Budenholzer's first year with the team, and they were just obviously that year they were just shot out of a cannon. You know how many games they won that year?
It's in the 50s easily.
Like at least
I'd have to go look real quick.
Or something. Yeah. But yeah, I watched them and I was just like enamored. Like Giannis, you know, like I'd never seen anything like him before. You know, like the way that they spread the floor for Giannis, and they kind of created this formula that they didn't seem to have prior seasons. So then I would just watch like literally just every game basically. So that started my fandom, and then so in 2021 I started university, and then in 2022 I started my own blog. The blog was called Bucks for Six blog. And I'm somewhat embarrassed to say this because it's a bit of a funny name. But the idea is that I would create like every story would be a maximum of like 6 minutes.
Okay.
Like that you would take to read it.
Yeah.
Which was kind of like restricting on like what I could write because it would have to be under a certain word count.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I just sort of posted to that periodically. I could see how many like viewers, like readers I was getting, and like some of the posts would get like 25. 25.
Got to start somewhere. Has to start somewhere. Yeah.
It wasn't even about that. It was just like I was kind of interested in writing about this team that I love. Yeah, I think the managing editor Van Fayaz of Brewhoop saw it, or someone saw it, and then he asked me if I'd be interested in joining Brewhoop, and I was like, hell to the yes. So yeah, that's how it happened. Yeah.
And here you are. That's awesome. I also had a very similar path when I was in college. I wanted to write about the Bucks, but didn't know really where to start. So I started my own. Frankly, I don't remember the name of it right now. If I dug, I could probably go find it. It was also just another play on basketball term that includes the word Bucks somewhere in it. So, and again, readership was not great. Readership was not wide, but that's okay. Like you said, it wasn't really necessarily about the readership. It's cool when you get interaction and stuff like that, but it's more so about just like honing it, having the chance, like this desire to write about and share your thoughts on whatever outside of the confines of just like Twitter, like tweets or whatever. So I relate a lot to that.
Going sort of thing. Like it's never about that, how many people are reading it, but just like you're just writing about something you're passionate about. And so I totally get that.
Yeah. Well, and then basketball has it always been your first love as a sport, or has it kind of competed with other? Because I was very late coming to basketball. I only came to basketball when I was 16, 17 during the Fear the Deer run. So I went most of my, at least, childhood without really being into basketball. How about yourself?
Yeah, exact opposite. I played Aussie rules football, which is really funny when Americans go and watch that. They're just like, it is probably the most unique sport ever. It's like a 360-degree tackling game, and it is insane. So I played that first. I played soccer. What else did I did? Little athletics, which is like, it's like track and field, high jump, long jump, etc. And then I gave it all up to play district basketball, which is like it's like a level higher than you're just doing it for shits and gigs type stuff. And I played for this club basically until 2021 or something. And I haven't played since, but yeah, I've been an absolute basketball nutcase for most of my life, to be honest. Yeah,
that's good. We need more actual lived experience playing basketball. Not to bag on the rest of my colleagues, but I know I myself have very little organized basketball experience, and I think outside of a couple of high school years, I'm not sure if the rest of the staff is bringing the heat. So it's awesome to have you on. Awesome that you're going to have all that experience and also a number of years of watching the Bucks and basketball in general to help kind of inform your takes. So I'm going to start grilling you now. The truce is over. Now it begins. This becomes your true podcast appearance. We're going to start where we have with every guest on the season preview series. Jack, which new Buck are you most intrigued by? Could be one of the free agents, could be a draftee, could be a two-way guy, or Exhibit 10 if you really wanted to get messy. but which of the new guys is most intriguing to you heading into the season?
Yeah, my first thought when I saw this question was like, it's probably like Gary Trent or DeLon Wright or someone. But then when I'm kind of considering all the options, I needed an excuse to talk about AJ Johnson. So I'm going to go with him for this question. And the reason that I'm so intrigued by him is his progression from what I've seen in a small amount of time, I think portends really well to what he could be in the coming years. I knew this kid's name just because, these like YouTube kind of Instagram kids you see a lot of, when you're on social media coming up. But so he obviously signed with the Illawarra Hawks in the NBL. And I think if you gave him truth serum now, he probably would have just stayed at Texas instead of coming to the NBL because, good Lord, I was watching the NBL Blitz, which is like the preseason tournament for the NBL, happens up in the Gold Coast every year. And so I remember watching him play, and I'm like, he couldn't dribble anywhere without someone taking the ball from him. Like, he looked like he was getting monstered out there. And I was like, oh, wait, this is the guy that's like the star player, like going to be an NBA player? I'm like, he doesn't look like he can do like anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, he kind of had like an up and down year in the NBL. They didn't really like the team wasn't really a good fit for him because they kind of played him as like this off ball, he'd get on and he might shoot some corner threes and stuff, and that's just not the best way to optimize him. So anyway, he kind of like he had some nice dunks, but as we saw, I mean, he averaged like 2.8 points per game in the season. And then when the Bucks drafted him, I was like, I kind of I had the same reaction as most Bucks fans. I was like, okay.
Interesting. You're like, that's interesting.
And then he went to Summer League, and I saw some of the stuff like my first reaction was, oh, he got better. Oh, that's different. Like he was not doing this stuff in the NBL. Like the functional handle, like that's one of the things that I love most about his game is he has a handle that actually allows him to like dribble past people, and the explosiveness, the athleticism is like real, and like he's got a very repeatable shooting motion, and he's big, he's a pretty good defender. Like there's not really anything that he does poorly, which I think is very interesting. And then so he's had from there, like in the preseason, he obviously had that game against the Lakers, but for the most part he's been missing a lot of shots.
Yeah.
But I'm not worried about that at all. I think there's been a lot made of the missed shots, but I'm like, to me, he's like a ball of clay, and I'm sort of watching him I'm watching the cogs turn. Just you can see him growing like in the moment. Like for example, like he's not strong enough to finish at the rim, but the fact that he's getting to spots, and like he's coming off the pick and roll, and he's making some reads off the pick and roll, like he's coming off the pick and roll and getting the guy on his back, putting him in jail. He's doing a bit of that. And like, for example, in the game yesterday against the Mavericks, he was they were paint switching, so he would get into the paint, and when he touched the paint, that's when they would switch the big onto him. And by that time, he was already extending up to the rim and just getting swallowed up by Lively. But then you could see him kind of the cogs turning again, where he would come off the second time and he'd hit the paint, and then he would retreat, dribble out, and draw the big. And so he's doing these things where it's like, number one, he's kind of forced into this position to be like the primary because no one else sort of from that, I don't know, 9 to 15 can really play that position. So it's kind of a bit unfair to just sort of say like, oh, well, he's not playing well in this role. And I can just see those cogs turning. I can see kind of this, and the athleticism, the wiry body type, I think is going to get like, he's already an athlete and he's got that wiry body type, which can work to his disadvantage, but I'd almost prefer that as a building block to some like stockier build. And so at 23 in the draft, I think there is like a really good sort of ball of clay here to mold into something interesting. And good Lord, it would be really nice if we got one finally, after a number of years of just maybe not hitting on those draft picks to the best degree. I've been really actually encouraged by him so far. So yeah.
Okay. I like all of that. I think it's not his fault that he got picked at 23. If the Bucks pick him at 33, I think everybody's like, oh my God, what a home run. Like, great job. Okay. Cost control. Of course, this is the upside guy that you pick. So not his fault he gets picked at 23, but obviously you get selected there. There's going to be expectations. would it be kick ass if he was shooting 45% from 3 and like had crazy splits? Of course it would be. However, I tend to agree with you that it's encouraging me that he's getting shots up, because I'm so used to these younger guys coming through, and even in preseason games being like, okay, which one of you wants to take the shots? Like Marjan will go nuts in a summer league game, and then we're all like, okay, that's just not the move, Marjan. So I suppose I'm happy in some sense that even if the percentages aren't good, he's still firing. And the NBA skill of speed is there for sure. It's just, I'd be so curious to see the directions he goes. Because even on his best timeline, let's say it takes three, like season 3 is when he finally like hits, right? How does that work out with like Giannis's timeline? I'm a believer that if it all works out, you're like, okay, this is great. Now you have like a really quick guard who will be athletic throughout his 20s while Giannis is in his 30s, and that's a great fit. But I mean, he's so young, and he obviously just has very little experience outside of some time in the NBL to be able to pull on and say, okay, this is what he's capable of. I was going to ask, the NBL Next Stars program, is it typical for guys who go in there to be players who are relied upon heavily by whatever team they end up with? Or is it truly like a developmental, they'll get some spots? Like, what is typical for an NBL Next Star guy? Because when I read about AJ Johnson, his fit with the Hawks and being in the program, I just couldn't really get to tell, like, is this typical? The fact that he struggled to even like really get on the court, was it something specific with the team? What's like a typical expectation for a next star guy?
Yeah. So the fact that he wasn't playing much, probably the NBL probably wouldn't have been happy with that. They are trying to get these players, and this is, like the 36ers last season had what's the dude's name? He was drafted to the LA. He was undrafted, but he signed. I think he's on a 2-way with the LA Clippers. Trenton Flowers.
Yes. Yep.
Trenton Flowers. He did not deserve, in my opinion, the minutes that he was getting. He hurt the team almost every time he was on the court. In my humble opinion.
That's strange, because per Google's AI, it says Flowers was a fan favorite in Adelaide. Apparently not for every fan. Not for every fan.
He was he can jump high. Fan bases, as we know, love the young dudes, but generally if you're going to have a next star, they want you to showcase them, because then when they get drafted, it's like, hey, look at what we did. We got X number of players, next stars drafted. Like Alex Sarr, obviously he was at the Perth Wildcats. He went number 1? What did Alex Sarr
I don't think
go?
he was first overall.
No, sorry, number 2. I think he was to the Wizards.
Yep.
And he was sort of like a backup big. But in terms of their NBA role, they're all different. But in the NBL, they certainly want them to be showcased. And Johnson certainly had a very interesting season. I remember listening to a podcast. I don't know if you've heard the No Ceilings podcast. It's like They were on it all year. And I was listening to their podcast. It's like, hey, I've got AJ Johnson in my lottery, and he's not even playing right now. And sort of they were always on the band of, like, if he had gone to Texas and just played like 18 to 22-year-olds, he would have put up a lot better portfolio than he did over here. So it's certainly like you have to be ready to hoop when you get here. And so, yeah.
Yeah, if he was a bit raw, that makes sense. I was just curious, and that does make sense as well, that if they're going to put together this program, they're going to want to showcase it to essentially keep the program going and keep eyes on Australian basketball, so that makes sense. I think AJ Johnson is a popular selection for a lot of people for completely understandable reasons. I think of all the first round, or even just any draft picks of the past couple of seasons, he's easily the most intriguing. Shout out Andre Jackson Jr. But in terms of what you could envision, because everything is so raw, you're like, oh, if it all comes together, this really worked out. And so I think Doc will give him run to start the season. If there are any injuries in the guard rotation at all, I mean, he has the ability to at least just bring it up the floor. Like even just simple, small stuff like that. You don't need to deputize this guy to be taking 10 shots a game, even if there's a bunch of injuries. Just say your job is to bring the ball up the floor, give it to Giannis, and then like defend your ass off on the other side. And I think those are easily achievable and realistic goals for him year one, and then just hope he picks up enough between the coaching staff and the other players around him as well. So I think it's a good selection there. Okay. Next question related to Young Bucks. Which Young Buck, i.e. guy with 2 or years less professional experience, who will have the greatest impact on this season? Your selection, your group you can pick from, I should say. AJ Green, the aforementioned AJ Johnson, Andre Jackson Jr., Chris Livingston, Tyler Smith, Marjan Beauchamp in no particular order. Which of those guys do you think will have the best impact or greatest impact on this season itself?
So I'm going to talk about 3 guys. AJ Green I think is like my answer here. Teams need shooting, and he's a shooter. So, I think he wins on the margins defensively. I think he's a better defender than he gets credit for. So I don't know. I don't feel like I need to talk about him. His case is very simple. My second guy is Andre Jackson. I love this guy. Like, I think he is an exquisitely talented defender. I kind of envision him like if you think back to the first time we played Golden State in Milwaukee last season, and he was the only guy who could stop Klay Thompson running off those down screens. They tried Beasley. Beasley was getting cooked every time. And
a consistent theme throughout the season, but also that evening in particular.
And it's just the reality of he's got to sand around the edges, I think, but his ability to get skinny around screens and he's probably a top 1% athlete if you were to just look at running and jumping in the NBA. And generally those traits, like AJ Johnson, you can apply this to as well. Generally those traits, if you can jump high and run fast, you can be a good defender in the NBA. Yep. And even the game I remember there was a game against Toronto that they lost late in the season. I believe Giannis was out for this game, and everyone was getting cooked by Quickly, Barrett, etc. And they threw him in there, and he completely just the fact that you put good defenders on the court and your defense will be better. It sounds simple, but as far as the defense goes, he is very interesting. I kind of envision him as a KCP type, where he can sort of he can guard shooters that are coming off picks, but also you could put him on a Ja Morant type thing, a smaller guy. And I hope they don't kind of give up on him just because that offensive game is it's still developing, and there is some real he has to. What I want to see from him is just some confidence, yep. Don't second guess yourself, and when you're dribbling up the court, be assertive about what you're doing, type of thing. On offense, can they? I wrote a note here. Can they start to involve him as a screener and have him in a Bruce Brown type role? But the offense has to be worked out. But as far as the defense, I mean, he's naturally very I think he's got a real future on that end, and that's where I separate him from your Marjons and your Chris Livingston and stuff. Is I know I can count on him to do a good job defensively, whereas with those guys, I can't tell you what they're good at. Marjon is 24 years old. And
he's
I
on
can't
the team.
tell.
He's on the team. That's what he's good at.
And I can't tell you what he's actually good at and what he can give you if you chuck him on the court. And so, Andre Jackson's a second guy, and I don't know if this is against the rules, but I was going there. Stanley Umude.
It's not against the rules. I've always opened it. Yes, you can go for
Yeah.
Stanley. He qualifies based off of being on a two-way.
I'm the only one on the island. The real estate is cheap over here. The water is warm, so come on down.
The mansion you're building on Umude Island is going to be massive.
And so like the case for Umude is, and I'm kind of, I can put my tinfoil hat on and give you some theories as to why he hasn't played much in the preseason. It may be just because I'm misevaluating him as a player, but I think there may be some politics that's going into this, which I'll get into. But as far as Umude goes, like the case is simple. Last year in Detroit, 45% from three on 2.2 attempts per game. That's 3 times the attempts that Andre Jackson shot. Not that Andre Jackson.
Saying. Just saying. Yeah.
I remember that stat because I put it in my story on the ranking the roster series when I did Umude. 45% from three on like decent volume is like, you got me interested. And I mean, and the other thing was he played real minutes in Detroit last year. Like if you take off the two-way tag, like he beat out a whole lot of those dudes to play, and because he now like, so the shooting is one thing, the defense is supposedly good. I'm not going to act like I was cramming Detroit film.
Just crushing Pistons film to be like,
last year.
Yeah.
I think they might have had Jaden Ivey out for a bit or something like that, and he was a real beneficiary of those minutes. But the case for him is effectively you're going to get, let's say there's a couple injuries in the wing room, and you've got, Portis, Wright, Prince, and then you've got Connaughton and Green, and then that next guy, Umude is the most accomplished NBA player out of everyone left.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, in the preseason, the minutes that he does get, he gets on and he plays good D and he hits 3-pointers. And so I'm just interested, like, what happens if they throw him out there with the main guys? His creation ability off the bounce is apparently not that great. I mean, we've seen very little of him, but you don't need it with the main guys. So he is, 6'6" with a 6'10" wingspan. Like, he's pretty interesting to me. And so to do a very specific role, I'm interested in him. And I think they're giving, like Marjon, obviously his option is coming up. And I,
it's
yeah,
over.
I think with Marjon, I'm kind of at the point where it's like they're kind of wasting. If they like giving minutes to him is kind of like at this point, like he's 24 and hasn't really developed at all. So they might have just missed on that draft pick, and I think they need to start investing resources in the next guys, like your Umudes, your Jacksons, and sort of, it sucks for Marjon, but I'm not seeing it. So yeah, with Umude, it's just like, I really am interested to see, like, the other thing was he played real minutes for Detroit last year, and he signed very early in free agency with us. And I just highly doubt that he signed to sit on the bench all year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think he could have got an opportunity elsewhere, which again makes me put on my tinfoil hat. Like, what did they tell him to get him to sign? Because he actually did a good job in Detroit. So yeah, that's my case for those three players.
I like all three, so I'll go in the same order you did. So AJ Green, best skill, like most repeatable skill, I would say, shooting. Okay. Defense in the margins, like he seems slightly better. I remember a couple of games, like, okay, he's got good defense. The question for him is, when does he go from just being shooter guy to connector piece guy? And that'll be kind of whatever that, if there is a ceiling to him, it'll be how he works within the flow of a wider offense. If he was to take on a larger role than just shooter guy, It's kind of like Pat Connaughton, like why Pat is valuable is, yes, he's a shooter. Yes, he can defend and rebound, or at least those used to be his calling cards. We'll see with this season. But the reason why he was so valuable is like he could fill so many different roles because he's a connector guy. He has like a wide enough skill set to do that. So can AJ Green do that? Ajax, if he can just slow the game down. A lot of it is so much, it's high octane speed, which is awesome to see compared to like our really old roster. So I understand why it's fun to watch him on defense, even if he is foul prone, because like, oh, like he can move laterally, he can defend up and down a little bit. But can he slow things down? And let's go ahead. Let's try and shoot at the basket too. Like we got to work on the 3-pointers. We got to work on taking shots.
Shoot the layup, shoot the dunks.
Shoot the layup, make the dunk, shoot the layup in transition, especially. Like you don't have to do the crazy pass. Shoot the dunk. And then Umude, I mean, I love that answer, not because I'm a great Umude mind. I'm not. I'm actually quite the opposite. But all of the two, this could actually go for all the 2-ways guys. I think Rollins and I don't know about Pozechniks if he's going to be hanging around. I think there's a possibility that Robbins might get that spot depending on how things work out here in the coming week or so. But all those guys will have a shot, I think, at getting even just like a non-guaranteed spot, because I can't, for the life of me, I can't imagine Marchand's going to be sticking around, even if it's just like a dump just to open a roster spot for like a second round pick that's never actually going to convey. I mean, I know that's a horrible thing to do for a former first rounder, but if you think one of your 2-way guys has actual value, like, hey, he might play 5 to 10 minutes or like even a little bit longer, depending on how much we're rotating the roster throughout the season, probably worthwhile upgrading one of those guys. So I like your thought process on that, especially with the fact that the Pistons, who were god awful, and are looking like they will also be pretty awful again this season, probably could have used, if it's a youngish guy with a little bit of upside, why wouldn't he,
this is my one hang up. I'm like,
why did he end up here?
If he's so good, if he's so good, why did the Pistons let him walk? Okay, so that's like the thing that I'm like, is it the limited kind of off the bounce creation? And that's probably your best case scenario if you're the Bucks. Like, look, the Pistons don't have the guys who draw that attention, and so his value within an offense is less than it would be theoretically with the Bucks. But I mean, yeah, there is always the thing of like the Pistons seemingly did not value him as much as I think he is. So, that's the one hang up.
If it's you versus the Pistons brain trust, I'm going to go with you every single time. So don't worry about that. Let's go. Okay. All right. Next question. Another ranking question. Rank the new free agent signings and how well they will fill the role they'll be given. The 3 guys you will be working with here, because I will not let you answer Stanley Umude again. It will be DeLon Wright, Taurean Prince, and Gary Trent Jr. Freeform answer for you what you think their role will be, but who will fill it the best, whatever role you think they'll have, and who will struggle the most to fill the role they'll be given?
This is an interesting question. When it's really funny because I can make the case that DeLon Wright, like both of them in the starting lineup, whoever is in the starting lineup is the winner of this question, right? Because DeLon Wright theoretically is like that's the guy you want next to Dame, and that defense is going to really jive with Dame's weaknesses. And then at the same time, Trent, I mean, the starting 2 guard on the Bucks gets a lot of 3-point opportunities, and they have to be a good shooter. And that's Trent's role in a nutshell. So you can make the case for both of them. I think I think Prince is 3rd no matter what. But I went with Trent because I think Trent's defense is closer to Wright's. Trent's defense is closer to Wright's defense than Wright's offense is to Trent's offense.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So yeah, I mean, his role within the starting lineup is I mean, he's going to get, if this offense like works, and I'll get into this later, but if this offense works as it should, like he should be the benefactor of like a whole bunch of open looks. And then I think, like I, like our guy Morgan, I am a hyper partisan Bucks watcher, so I don't really watch too many other teams. So like my impression of Trent's defense was like that he was not that good defender at all. And then, like people seem to think that like he was a fair bit better than that reputation might say. And I mean, I've been pleasantly surprised. Like he's pretty like, active. His feet are decent. And so, yeah, I think Trent would be the answer there. I think with him, like, I just want to see him be a dog on defense. Like, like what's the motor like? Like, can he kind of like, just really devote himself to that sort of 3-and-D, a bit off the bounce role. And then with Wright, I think you've mentioned this in past podcasts, but like, what is the role of a sixth man on the Bucks? It's kind of an interesting role that sometimes they've hit on and sometimes it just hasn't worked. Yep. But like, Wright, I mean, all three of these guys, I've said this before, like, just eating minutes on the court as opposed to last year where they were putting on like, like Beasley and then it's campaign and you're just like, oh my God, like I'm getting anxiety over all these bad defenders.
Yeah, Jay Crowder's out there to waste everybody's time. Shout out Jay.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Shout out to our friend Jay. Never again.
Who will almost assuredly end up in Australia, right? Like we feel like NBL is a possible landing spot for him. Okay, cool.
Is he on a roster? Do we know?
No, he's still out of the league. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Wright's going to be awesome. You just chuck him out there. You put him on your Tyrese Maxeys, your De'Aaron Foxes. He's going to be killer with the team. And then Prince. I mean, I've been pleasantly surprised with Prince. Like, it's nice to have, like they stuck him on Josh Giddey in the Bulls game, and I thought he did a nice job. Like, again, just another guy you can chuck out there for 25 minutes. He's going to eat 25 minutes, and he's not going to hurt your team. He'll hit some threes on the offensive end. Big wing defenders are important in the NBA, and I think he's going to do an awesome job. And like, all three of these guys, I'm really excited just to, go through the season. They're all competent guys. And, but yeah, I'd go Trent, Wright, Prince.
The thing about Taurean Prince is, ironically, he might be the most important, especially if Chris Middleton, who, let's be honest, will miss time in the season, and we can never be sure when he'll be available. Who else is going to guard a wing on this team?
They don't have another Jackson, wing defender.
Yeah. Ajax, maybe, if he isn't fouling out. Maybe you forced Delon Wright to do it. So ironically, Taurean Prince might be like the most important low key for filling a couple of minutes, like you said, just eating minutes. The other thing, I like how you brought up about Gary Trent Jr., because I too, much like the Pistons, I was not crushing Raptors tape. I wasn't crushing Raptors tape this past season. I wasn't doing it the year before. I do not crush Raptors tape. And so I also had the same impression. I was like, oh, Gary Trent Jr. I was like, I know he's a good offensive player. And then people were like, oh, but he's like a good defender. It's like, well, I mean, was he part of the entire Raptors system? And so that was just like, he was good in that particular way that Nick Nurse was playing. And I mean, my great grave concern about the season is we're going to be pinning a lot on Gary Trent Jr. being like, not just like a better defender than Malik Beasley, but like a much better defender. And if he isn't, we might still be in some trouble. So that's the thing I worry about. It's like the offense, obviously. I think that's any two guard. They've done a great job, John Horst and the team, of like offensively, whoever the two guard is, they always do a good job finding like he will score, he will shoot threes, he will make threes. Don't worry about that. It's like if he fits more with what you thought he was, your initial impression, like, oh, I don't know if he's like a great defender. He's probably just whatever. If he's out there and he's just whatever, that's not. Dame is like a D level defender on a good day. And then if Gary Trent Jr. is not like not even an A, but like a B level defender. Okay, we're going to be in some trouble. So that's something that I'm curious about too. So I think I agree with you in terms of what his role on offense is. He will fit the best of the three, but how much are we going to ask of him on defense, and how much can he do? Is he just coming here? It's like, look, I'm here to just get shots up. I'm sure he will defend. I'm not worried about that, but it's his primary motivation. Like, I'm going to show that I have an expansive offensive game so that when I inevitably leave here next summer, some team is going to be like, Gary Trent Jr. is the offensive piece we're missing, and we'll figure out the defense elsewhere. That's what I'm curious about with him. And I don't know, we're not going to have an answer on that until like at least a month or two in the season, if not longer.
Yeah, and it's a good point about his defense. Like, I was listening to the Nate Duncan, Eric Name kind of like season preview of the Bucks, and like Nate made the point that like I was watching Gary Trent, like he's guarding Cade Cunningham, and like obviously Cade's sort of a unique like ginormous point guard. I'm a big Cade fan. I like him, but like Trent was just like on like he's not. You kind of wish like Trent was like the size of Prince. Like if you could sort of mesh those two, like he's kind of like a little bit undersized for what they need. But then like, like Middleton is what's he like? Like he's not going to be able to like, the speed won't be there. But like, like if I kind of don't mind Middleton in power matchups where he just has to kind of like, push dudes around, but
just be strong like a strong guy. Yeah.
But yeah, like I remember Nate made the point that it was called kind of like, like he'll do a better job than Beasley, but he is overmatched for this particular role that the Bucks are asking him to do. But what can you do?
It will be, I think, the quest from here on out of not replacing Drew Holiday, because it's impossible to do that, but how close of a facsimile between Dame, or if Dame moves on to another team, whoever the point guard is, like that was the calling card between Eric Bledsoe and Drew Holiday. I mean, you started watching when they acquired Eric Bledsoe during Bud's first season. Okay, that starts a short run of like 4 or 5 seasons where they're just doing, I mean, it's like power point guard play.
Yeah, elite point of attack defense.
Exactly. And so now Dame is not that, and Beasley was not that. And we've talked ad nauseum about the fact that you bring Beasley in when you think Drew is going to be there. So it makes a little bit more sense, the fit there. So now they're going to not struggle, but it's going to be that question of like, okay, can now like AJ Johnson, can he develop? Can he put on some muscle? And can he start doing that? So now it's going to be like this quest to fill in for that, because I have a feeling, whether it be Gary Trent, whether it be, shooting guard free agent, XYZ in the future seasons, it's going to be hard to find point of attack guy on the open market for a minimum. Like that's just going to be hard to do. So it's going to have to develop from within or trade. And so I don't want to build up expectations for Gary Trent defensively too high, because I don't want people to get disappointed, primarily myself, when he inevitably is not able to like contain the numerous elite guards in the NBA. So I wish him luck, but I like your ranking. And again, right, as you said, as I've said, just we'll see what his role is. Like carving out that role for that sixth guy, that first guard off the bench, has always been difficult for the Bucks. So, okay, let's go off the bench into the starting lineup. Rank these players in terms of their importance to the season: Damian Lillard, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez.
So excellent question. First off, you can make a case for either of these guys, but I mean,
if you say Stanley Umude, we will be ending the podcast, and this will not
this is going to be an ongoing bit.
Yeah. Yes, we're gonna have to replace our miscellaneous segment now that I remember.
Umude corner every time I'm on the pod. Yes. Has he gotten minutes yet?
Yeah, when he inevitably. What's the Oshkosh? How's he looking at Oshkosh? How's he doing with her? Yes.
Okay, yeah. No, with this question, I kind of there's a million different ways you can go. I look at this as if the player, if we lose this player who, what hurts the team the most. And I am terrified of the prospect of like a Brook Lopez injury. I have long thought that Brook Lopez is like the straw that stirs this drink in Milwaukee. Like he is the system on defense. People don't like the drop, but like it allows you to guard the pick and roll 2-on-2, and Brook is the most talented drop defender like in the NBA. I think like he's amazing, and so like if you take Lopez off the team, like the Bobby replacement is that's
not
tough.
It's let's say it's substandard. It's not perfect. It's imperfect.
So yeah, I sort of thought about this, and I'm like, okay, like Lopez is the top one simply because, and it feels insane like having Lillard below Lopez, but like literally, I think this team crumbles if Lopez is not the starting center. So yeah, we'll chuck Lopez there. And then I'll go, Lillard. I think I got my stat here is they were 1-8 when he was injured last year.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they really needed him last year too. I mean, he's very valuable. But yeah, I mean, I think just with him, like his ability to be an offensive source is valuable. But at the same time, if he was out, maybe you're just going to play through Giannis more, and the defense is not going to suffer. And so he's probably second. And then with Middleton, I mean, they need Middleton to win at the highest levels. And he plays like a really important role. Like you felt like last year, I thought the problem with them last year was they had like no one who could dribble the ball other than Giannis, Lillard, and Middleton. And so when Middleton was out, it kind of just like everything got so damn stagnant. Mm-hmm. And so I think Middleton plays a really important role, not only as a shooter, but as a passer and as a guy who teams have to like respect. Yep. But as far as like his value in this question, I think he's the third one, just because I mean he's not like a top tier offensive player or defensive player. I mean, in terms of like the wider NBA, in terms of like obviously he's a top tier player on this team, but like he's not like a top 10 offensive player anymore, and he's not. So if you take him off the team, you can probably replace him more than you can Lopez and Lillard. So yeah, I'd go Lopez, Lillard, Middleton.
I like that. If you think of it like Lopez is the floor raiser, Dame is the ceiling raiser, and Chris is the guy who glues it all together and hopefully pushes you more realistically towards the ceiling. Because it's great if Dame, in theory, raises your ceiling like through the roof to a title. How like realistic is it to get there just off of his contributions alone? Kind of iffy, especially on the defensive end. The thing about Chris too is like, I was trying to like think as you were talking through it. So when Giannis has the ball or when Dame has the ball, it's like those guys, because of how skilled they are offensively, they are almost always a lot of the time looking for their shot primarily, or they will create for one another. So that kind of presents a different challenge for opposing defenses, because then they say, okay, well, we'll try to throw a double. And even if you throw a double at Dame or Giannis, there's a lot of times where they're going to say, okay, I'm going to go for it anyhow. Like I'm skilled enough. I'm either going to go through it or use my skill set to be able to create a shot. And with Chris, he's the guy who they won't typically throw a double at him, but he's the most willing to kind of penetrate, isolate, whatever it is. And it leaves those other two guys the freedom to roam off the ball. It's not, a lot of people think of Chris Middleton and off the ball movement, or you think of off the ball movement with the role player guys, but it's like, well, Giannis and Dame are going to be able to roam a little bit and kind of make things happen off the ball as well. And so it's the fact that Chris can then execute and pay off whatever those off ball motions are. And he's willing to do it. Like he'll obviously put the team on his back and get up tough shots if that's what's necessary, if he's like the only guy who can do it. But that's why he's important, because he will actually be the focal point around which other stuff can happen without it being like, okay, F it, I'm going to get this shot up anyways every single time. So I like
love
your ring.
Chris. Yeah. I love Chris on like second side actions, like they'll have maybe a pick and roll, like the one action that they run a lot, but the Bucks run a lot for Chris is like they'll have an action occurring on one side of the floor, and then they'll have a 3-side on the other side, and then they'll have, like, in Australia we call this a flow cut. We call this flow. This I don't know, this action. It was, I remember the exact year, Basketball Australia, like if you went to like a country tournament or like a state champs tournament, everyone would do a 2-3 zone on defense and they'd run flow on offense. And so Chris is like excellent. Like, let's say Giannis is at the top, you've got a guy on the wing and Chris is in the corner. The guy on the wing cuts through, and then Chris, Giannis does a dribble handoff with Chris, and then they just throw the lob up the top. I mean, that's they've done that for like years, and I love Chris in those situations.
Yeah. Realistically, though, he may just miss half the season. So in terms of importance to the season, he might only be out there.
There's always
that.
So there's
you have to account for that. Dame and Brooke, I mean, Dame has had some injury troubles, I don't know, in the past 5 years. Not that one season that I think he played like 20 games and then he ended up getting sidelined. And then obviously they shut him down the season before he got traded late just for tanking purposes. But like Brooke has been an Iron Man. Dame is usually available for most games. Chris is the guy who is the biggest question mark I'm missing. So even if you just want to say like who's going to be on the floor the most, Chris would drop to the bottom there if you just wanted to do it on that basis as well. So, okay. Next question. What is the team's current greatest weakness? This could be something as micro as a certain skill set they're lacking. It could be wider, like roster construction. Maybe you're not a Doc Rivers truther, or it could be even something wider, like, some sort of dynamic off the court or the direction the team is going in. What's the team's greatest weakness right now?
This one, I think, like, I thought about it for 10 seconds and I'm like, oh, that's it. It's that their roster is imperfect. Right, so like their closing lineup, Dame is going to be out there, bad defender. Chris is going to be out there at this point, iffy defender. And Brook Lopez is going to be out there. I mean, he is a excellent drop defender, but he's also not scheme versatile. You don't, as we saw with our friend Adrian Griffin, you don't play Brook. You don't play Brook the way that he doesn't play. You play him in the drop. And that's the only way you play them.
Yep.
And so their roster is imperfect. Their two-way guys are still guys that were available on the minimum with, Trent, Wright, Prince. And so they're not going to solve all your problems. My answer to like the upcoming question of like, in order for the Bucks to win a title, they have to, is very related to this, and I'll get to that. But like they have an imperfect roster, and at the end of games, they don't have the option. Like the Celtics, for example, are gonna have 4 switchable dudes, and then they're gonna have like Porzingis out there, and it's a luxury to have that. And the Bucks are not, you can guarantee 3 out of the 5 guys. Or at least 2 out of the 5 guys are going to be, like you're going to have to work around their imperfections. And, other teams are going to go straight at Dame in pick and roll and in isolation and, like put up or shut up, like they have to deal with that.
Yep. All right. I've been wanting to do this exercise with somebody because I always think about it, but I never actually do it. We're going to run through like because let's be honest, this is a Doc Rivers team. It's going to probably mostly be veterans barring injury or one of the young guys be like having a major step forward. So let's just run through the like 8 veterans and say, right, just like good defender, bad defender, iffy defender, or like whatever, like you said with Brook Lopez, sort of situational. So Brook Lopez, situational defender, good at what he does, but limited, right?
Yep.
Damian Lillard, bad defender.
Bad defender.
Chris Middleton, iffy defender at best. He can have like a couple of possessions, but let's just be honest, it's not going to be amazing. Giannis, amazing defender. DeLon Wright, we think good defender?
Yep, we think good. Yep.
Pat Connaughton, TBD, we're worried. We're concerned, but I mean, maybe you're less concerned about Pat.
I mean,
Pat hasn't
with Pat, it's like, I think the athleticism has waned, but also his off-ball defense is like sometimes god awful. Like his kind of like awareness of where his guy is on the court can be so bad at times. But you know, I'd probably say he's a bad defender.
We'll say
he seems small. Like the one thing I noticed last year was he seemed small.
It kind of seems like he's shrinking with age, right? I don't want to be hating, but he seems to be shrinking a little bit.
Yeah.
Stupid.
So anyway, okay. Keep going. Sorry.
Bobby Portis, horrific.
Bad.
Maybe one of the worst defenders of all time. Taurean Prince, we hope good. Let's just say good. Let's be optimistic.
Yeah, let's put him in the good. Yeah.
And then Gary Trent Jr. You and I were both iffy on question mark. Okay, question mark. So I think we have, in terms of good defenders, you have Brook in like a certain lane. You have Giannis. You have DeLon Wright. You have Taurean Prince. That is what? 1, 2, that's 4 out of your like 9 veterans that are probably good. Yeah. And call it 3.5 because Brook is sort of limited. So you have about a third of the guys you're going to rely upon to win you games who are considered good defenders. Okay, let's just be honest. It just doesn't look great. So then so much of it falls then onto what does the system look like? The system was horrible last season. It didn't fit. It was horrible for the personnel that it was trying to run with. So it didn't fit the personnel. And I'll be honest, I have not watched a lot of Bucks preseason games, and also it doesn't really matter all that much. But we're going to find out anyway. We're going to find out like within, I'm not going to say a couple weeks, but like after a month of like games played, we're all going to be like, okay, we'll have a pretty good sense of, is this system going to work with the players that we have? And so that's just something to be concerned about. So tied into your weakness, the imperfections of the roster, that's tied into the fact that it's still extremely unbalanced on the defensive end, assuming none of the young guys really take a leap forward. Maybe one of them will, and that will help kind of shuffle things out a little bit. But you compare that to like the championship season where, I mean, the really only truly bad defender was Bobby. And even then Bobby could kind of like fill in for even then he was like, okay, he sticks in. He's like doing a little bit okay with a switch.
Yeah, like Bobby's fit on those teams was like oceans better than his fit on the Dame teams, because like you could hide him on guys and like a lot of the times he was the only bad defender on the court. And make no mistake about it, teams knew that. Like they but like behind him, you've got Brook and Giannis and Drew and all these dudes, and then like on the Dame teams, it's like, all right, so we've got Dame, we know he's bad, and then like can we get Bobby to be the only other bad guy?
Yes,
on the court. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm like looking through here. I mean, like for guys who played a ton of minutes for the team in the playoffs, like, okay, Chris was still a pretty good defender. Then Drew, obviously elite. Giannis, elite. PJ Tucker, elite at his role that he was brought in for. Brook, a couple years younger, also great. Pat, great at that time. Bobby, the worst of the bunch. And then like after that, the guys didn't really play that much. Like Bryn Forbes had his role drop pretty quickly as the playoffs went along. And Jeff Teague filled in a little bit. So of that entire group, yes, you're right. Like you could survive Bobby because out of the 8 guys playing, he was the worst one. And you only needed to spot him in for a few minutes and the 4 other guys around him could function. Now you're running Bobby out there. It's like, well, sure as shit hope Bobby knows how to figure this out for us, because like they're going to be going at him and he is not getting help from his teammates, not as much as he would have in the past. So something to keep in mind, but I'm glad you brought that up and I'm glad we were able to do that exercise.
Could I just say, I noticed in their first preseason game against Detroit, I don't know if this means anything, and frankly, I was not monitoring this in the other games, but they were pairing Dame and Brooks minutes, I thought, very intentionally, and they were having Wright on the court with Bobby. I found I thought that was interesting. Maybe they do that is if they if you're going to have Dame out there, you're going to put the best drop defender they have, we just hope Dame survives, and then with Portis, then it's the inverse where you've got the excellent guard defender to counteract Bobby's weaknesses. So I think that could be interesting thing to monitor.
It's a great point. It's about buying time. Like if Gary Trent Jr. can buy just a little bit more time than Malik did last season, and if Brooke is playing in the role that he's best at, okay, that's an upgrade. And if DeLon Wright can buy Bobby like a half second of time to figure out wherever with the switches, if Bobby's doing like a little drop, whatever it is, I mean, that can make all the difference. And then a lot of it too is buy Giannis the time to read, recognize, and react to whatever it is to help out whoever's the ball handler or whatever action's happening off the ball as well. So I think that's a good point too, something to keep an eye on. And I'm glad we're able to do that exercise. Okay, next one. We watch a lot of basketball. You watch a lot of Bucks basketball. You're up, in the middle of the nights watching on illegal streams Bucks basketball. You've upgraded since then, I hope. But something you hope to see the Bucks do during the regular season is blank. And I've couched this one in. We all have our like pet peeves or pet projects or things that we want them to work on. Me personally, it's like Dame Giannis pick and rolls. That's just what I want to see. That's what I'll be keeping an eye on like most nights. What's something that will keep you interested, something you'll be looking out for, something you hope the team kind of works on throughout the season?
Well, Riley, great minds think alike. I also
perfect.
have mine is. It is mostly around Dame Giannis pick and rolls, but more focused on I want Giannis to lean into his kind of playmaking a little bit, a little bit more this season. And the reason I say that is because prior to Dame coming, the recipe for this team winning was we're gonna kick the crap out of you on the defensive end, and then we're going to try and do enough offensively. And I mean, if you remember that title run was not a pretty offensive showing by the Bucks. I mean, do you remember that game 3 against the Nets? Do you remember that rock fight? I remember that game was like 80-68 or something, like 80-70, whatever. They won by like a few points, but like they scored 80 points in an NBA game. I remember that it was something like low score like that. But now, so from that standpoint, your point guards are Drew Holiday and Eric Bledsoe, and you are not, like Chris is there, but you're not running like mass pick and rolls with those guys. And so it's very defendable to just stick the ball in Giannis's hands and do a lot of that. Now with Dame, their recipe to win kind of changes. It is, we're going to be hopefully elite offensively and good enough defensively. And so I think with Giannis, it's like, I want those two orbiting in the same kind of stratosphere, because number one, Giannis, it's not like before it would be Giannis, then Drew, then Chris, or you can swap Chris and Drew. And now it's very much Giannis and Dame, then Chris, then everyone else. And so I want Giannis to, I think, use Dame to make his life easier. In terms of like the offense that they run, like if Giannis has a matchup on the block, if he's guarded by like DeMar DeRozan or someone like that, like chuck it to him, go do your thing, go jump over 10 people, go dunk it, do that. But the possessions that, like, I remember the possessions that I dislike from Giannis is when he's got Anthony Davis and he's got Bam Adebayo and he's trying to take these dudes one-on-one, when it's like, that's most times just not going to work, even for Giannis's like superhuman talent. And so I think in those situations, he should be like, all right, well, how do I manipulate this? How do I get a better matchup for myself? If I set a good screen on Dame's defender, Bam's going to have to step up and guard that off the dribble 3-point shot, and then he can pitch it to me and they might double that. If they do, then I'm playing in the short roll, and then I've got options: spray it out to shooters, or lay it up, or shoot a little floater. But I really want, like, the thing that, like, I compare sometimes LeBron and Giannis together, and the thing that I'm not some like LeBron fanboy, but I've always been a big fan of the way he dictates and manipulates games, and his brain is like a supercomputer, and he can kind of like make the defense, put the defense in a bind. And I really want Giannis to lean into that, like all right, I'm going to make the defense make a decision here. They're either going to guard me or they're going to guard Dame, and then it's like tic-tac-toe what decision I make after that. But I just want sort of, number one, get Dame involved so he's feeling comfortable. But number two, Dame's gravity can make Giannis's life so much easier. And I really want Giannis to lean into the like superhuman talent that Dame is on the offensive end.
It's a really good point. I'm always waiting for what Giannis 2.0 looks like, because I'm such a believer in this guy for obvious reasons. I think everybody's a believer. And so it is frustrating when in year 12 of his career, we're still going downhill, shoulder lowered, like, make it happen. It's like, okay, I mean, I'm sure for him, it is really satisfying when he, like, I remember in the finals when Torrey Craig stood in there for a charge and Giannis, like, just killed Torrey Craig. It's like, look, easy. If you're going to stand in and try and take a charge against me, I'm going to make you earn it. And so I'm sure that is satisfying for Giannis. But you switch it up. Now Dame is here. And then I find out, much to my chagrin, that Giannis doesn't really know how to set a pick. It's like, wow, that's the bad. That was like one of my bugaboos all season was like, Giannis, set a goddamn pick. Like, don't just slip it every single time, because that's not helping everybody. Like, if you slip every single time, people are going to get used to it and they're just not going to take it seriously. You're not really helping Dame. So I want to see the expansion of his game as the utility guy. Like, I think he will ever get to the point of LeBron? Quite obviously not. Like you said, it's just different approaches of the game. LeBron has a preternatural feel for it. Giannis has a great feel for the game, but it's just there's levels to it, and that's fine. But I don't think Giannis is a rock. He's not dumb as a rock. Like, he can put some of these things together. And so I think that's exactly right, that it's not even just pick and rolls, which would be my favorite, like, little fold to it. It's all the small stuff. Like, don't punish yourself. You don't have to punish yourself all season long. There's a time and a place to really, like, let it rip and enforce yourself. And to his credit, last season, the organization of what was going on the floor under Griffin was such a shit show that you're like, well, okay, Giannis just said, I guess I'll just do it myself. And Dame was struggling for, like, off the court reasons. And, this is, whether or not Milwaukee was ultimately where he really wanted to end up, or in this situation fitting in, like, all those questions. So Giannis just said, look, this team needs to win. Oh, I want to win. So I'm just going to do the thing that has worked for me in the past. And to his credit, it, like, got us a large number of wins. But how many games was it him just bailing us out through sheer physical attrition? And that's just not sustainable.
And that is so difficult to play like that for 82 games.
Yes,
and, like,
exactly.
No wonder he got injured. Yeah, I mean, the point about him, I will be honest, the Giannis screening was very frustrating to me too. So I'm like, number one, he's not good at it. He's not setting good picks, and he like put a dude on the floor, like get an illegal screen once every 2 games. Like, I would actually be happy with that. Because number one, if he sets that good pick, this is what I'm saying. Like, if he sets the good pick, it sets up the domino of his man has to step up, and then he's playing in the 4-on-3 in the pocket, and so. And so, like, there was a real sense to me as if, number one, he's like, oh, this is new, and I actually just want to go back to, like, ISOs on the left block, and I don't really want to do this. And my thing is, like, absolutely not. Like, I posted a clip, like, a couple weeks ago of Giannis with a high. He's doing a high. It was a early game against the Pacers last year, and he's got the ball, and Brook comes to set a high pick and roll, and Giannis splits the high pick and roll at half court, Euro steps around the defender, and goes in for the and one. And I'm like, this guy is one of the like most gifted, skilled players this game has ever seen. And if he's telling himself that he's just not comfortable playing in the short roll, that like, because I can see I saw the uncomfortability all season. Is he gets it in the short roll? There's some like short little like guard that's like waiting to fall over in front of him. Kyle Lowry, Jalen Brunson. I'm looking at you, and he's just like doesn't like the whole like decision making of having to like, oh, what's happening, and like it's very like this. But I just flatly reject that he's unable and like shouldn't, that he's unable to like excel in that role. Like this guy is so damn good, so damn talented, and I think he can be a lead in the role if he sets his mind to it. And I want that attitude of like, I'm gonna do my crash and barge stuff, but I'm also gonna like get into my Draymond Green for 30% of the game, and I'm gonna like really explore the playmaking. Like, you know, he had a play against the Bulls, and you know, he just he could have gone, but he just pitches it to Dame. The guy goes under, then he sets a rescreen. Just do a bit of that stuff, you know, like it doesn't have to be like too complicated, but like, yeah, I want him to lean into that playmaking role, because if he doesn't, we're not going to get the best out of Dame. And the other thing is like with if Brook is the screen setter, Brook's probably the best screen setter on the team, but then you run into the issue of where do you put Giannis? You space Giannis because no one's going to guard him, and so like you need Giannis, like in my eyes, to be like the guy who's setting 15 picks a game. Yep. Or like, you know, 10 to 15, like he sits 7 picks a game. Like that needs to be higher last season. And so I want him to be like lean into like playing as a hub a little bit more, and like playing as like and just make his life easy, you know, play off the gravity that the team has provided for him, play off Gary Trent, play off DeLon Wright, and get the ball. And then the final point I make is Giannis, when Giannis has like daylight to the rim, when a dude's not in front of him and he's got like a crease, he never misses. Like he never misses when the guy is like, when he's got like a crease to the rim and he can just put it in. It's when he's like trying to take like Bam and AD one-on-one. Those guys are like the best, most talented defenders in the world. And just going one-on-one at these guys just is not a sustainable way to play offense.
It really stood out to me last season when that story came out of like, Doc Rivers is like, all right, I'm just sick of it. Like, you two, we're just going to all stand here. The whole team is going to stand here and watch you do pick and roll in practice. And I think Dame was like, well, guys are just laughing at us. It's like, it's not even something to be embarrassed about, because for Giannis, like, think of his coaches. So you had Larry Drew for a season. Giannis was 18. Doesn't really count. I mean, like, of course, skill set development, physical development. Then you have Jason Kidd, who like experiments a bunch, but leads into like, you know, we're just kind of working on his skill set. And then you get Bud, who's like, look, this guy's a physical monster. We're just going to maximize that. Like, that is the way he's going to win. And so he hasn't really had a system or a coach up until this point that says, hey, we're going to need you to be setting picks. And he's never had a player to the level. It's like, well, Giannis has to defer to this guy or work with this guy to make it work. Because Drew in the pick and roll was like pretty good, and he's decent, like attacking the basket and kicking out if necessary. But obviously Dame, as you're in hopes, is a much higher level. And so it's not even, don't even be embarrassed about it. You just haven't been asked to do this before. So yeah, it's frustrating watching. It's like, how can you be 6'11" and 250 and like an absolute physical freak and not really know how to set a pick? Well, if he's not asked to do it for the majority of his career, it's going to be hard to do it on the fly. So I'm hopeful. And part of the hope of the Dame acquisition is like, okay, you have this really cerebral offensive mind next to you now. Like, just soak that in. Like, that will be valuable for you. That will do you in like, you'll be well set by that for a decade plus if you take on these lessons now, because Dame will eventually drop off at some point. and Giannis, his own physicality is going to drop off at some point. Why not start getting ahead of it now with like some of the smaller stuff, some of the easier stuff? You're not going to be able to go through, guys. Like, that's just the reality of it. So I think this has been a long discussion on this, but it's something that like is a pet peeve of mine and something that I continue to hope for Giannis. And I think having Dame is the opportunity to start that transition to where is Giannis going to be 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line. He's just, if you think him going through Bam now is hard, like think of when he's 34, it's just going to be that much tougher. So definitely something to keep an eye on. I'm glad you brought it up. I know we're doing a lot of, part of my issue with these questions has been like I've been critiquing the team, but that was kind of my mood when I wrote this up. So we're gonna try and like switch it here to be optimistic. We'll see if you're optimistic on this one. Next question: in order for the Bucks to win a title this season, they must blank. And you kind of already teased your answer, but go for it.
Yeah, it's win on the margins. They have to do the little things much better. You know, like I said, like the team is not perfect, but if like the way I kind of think of it is like if Bobby Portis is at best a 5 out of 10 defender, well, can he be a 5.5 out of 10 defender? Mm-hmm. Can Dame go from 5.5 to 6 out of 10? You know, like these little things, like you know, like I a while ago I wrote about Bobby Portis and his honestly lack of like effort and intentionality about his pick and roll coverage. You know, I'm a guy like I like if I was, you know, whatever this is worth, but like I like Bobby in a hedge and recover scheme. I don't like him in a switch, and I definitely don't like him in a drop.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, like in terms of like Bobby's role, like a couple slides and then he's sprinting back to his man, and I did not see that last year. And like, you know, with Dame, it's like, yeah, he's small and like there's going to be problems there. But I mean, to Dame's credit, one thing that I have seen in this preseason is they seem to be icing all of his pick and rolls, which means like people call it downing, but like sending the pick and roll to the sideline. And so you can kind of dictate, you're not going to get screened because your back is up against the screener, if you get what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so it's easier to guard the pick and roll that way. And they have been, you know, Brooks seems to be communicating well with Dame this preseason game in terms of like Dame's getting on those ices and he's not allowing himself to be screened. And, you know, even if that's going to cause the defense to spend 1 or 2 more seconds, you know, flipping the screen and making the screener, you know, go all the way over with his back to the baseline, and you're just making the defense put in 10% more effort, you're making the offense put in 10% more effort. And you know, even like Giannis, like I find when a habit that Giannis I think has developed is like when he gets tired, he's going to do the thing where he gets the ball in the backcourt and he's going to dribble the ball. He's going to take 7.9 seconds to get it across the half court. And then and then he's going to dribble up and he's going to get a dummy screen from Brook and he's going to shoot a 3 at the top of the key and it's going to miss. And it's like you are throwing away a possession every time you do that. And it's like these little things on the margins. I absolutely believe this team can like compete with Boston. Like if they get into a series with Boston, I actually like their matchup. But like Boston does not need to win on the margins because of the natural talent that they have at like every position. Whereas the Bucks, it's like Bobby has to be switched on, Dame has to be switched on. You know, Giannis can't be like missing box outs. You know, Brook, you know, I think Brook does a pretty good job, but you know, like all of these kind of like little weaknesses in our games, like we have to kind of use that 10% of effort that when we didn't use in the past season. Like obviously Dame with his off-ball defense, like got to be switched on. And so my thing with this team is just like they have to win on the margins. Like that is the recipe for them winning a championship, because they're not going to win on like natural ability on the defensive end.
Really good point. I tend, especially the Boston, right? So, excuse me, They have their skill set. It's also just a very balanced roster. On top of that, we talk about balance. Like, they're an extremely balanced roster. Bucks, for all their talent, and they are talented, they're going to have to work their asses off to make it happen. Yep. Like, to make it all fit. These are not puzzle pieces that naturally just sync up. Okay, real easy. This fits right here. Like, when Drew showed up, it's like, oh my God, of course. Like, this is such an easy fit because it fit right into the team's identity, which, like you said, was defense first, and pray to God we score enough points at the very end just to be able to get it over the finish line. Now it's totally different. You switch it up. A lot of the holdovers from that title team where defense was the calling card need to now adjust to the fact that we're going to have to bring in an offense first guy. And that's a completely different puzzle piece from any guard they've had since like the height of Brandon Jennings when the team was god awful. So it's like, okay, it's for a lot of these guys, they've never had to deal with a Bucks team where this happens. So even in the playoffs, like, okay, they have a good regular season. I think they're going to have to work to earn like a good seed in the regular season. I don't think they're going to be cruising like they were at the height of the Bud years. Like, even if everything's going well, I think they're going to have to work to earn it. And that's not a bad thing. They're going to need the reps for it anyways. And even then, like, I want to tune in and like Bobby Portis comes on the floor and I'm like, oh my God. I don't want to see Bobby checking in and be like, I mean, we have to hold tight. We have to pray for the next 5 in-game minutes that they can just hang tight. Like, I want to have just a little bit more than that. So I think you're exactly right that the pieces are there, but they need to put in a lot of efforts that I think because of the way the coaching situation was last year, because of things that were going on with Dame's life, the effort just was not there, which is why Giannis had to just do it for everybody else anyways. And then he gets injured, and now here we are again next season. So I think that's a great point, and we'll see if they put it together. That's where's the fire? That's the other question is like, do these guys have the fire to compete at that level? I think a lot of them do, but we didn't see it last season, not to the same extent. So I think it's an open question still.
Yeah. And one point I'll make is last season, like over the past 2 seasons, I have watched the Miami, like a good analog for Bobby Portis for me is like, if you watch Kevin Love and Bobby Portis do the same, screen and roll defense action. They are both hedge and recover bigs. But if you watch, now Kevin Love is god awful. Right, and he can play on defense, and he can play a maximum of like 15 to 20 minutes per night. But if you watch him do this coverage, he understands exactly what his job is, and he moves well within like he knows. All right, I'm hedging 2 steps. I got to have my hands high, and then I am rotating my body and sprinting back to my guy. And like as a veteran, you kind of you expect this out of Kevin Love, like a champion, NBA champion and whatnot. But like Bobby can be better than Kevin Love, but Bobby should study how Kevin Love actually, commits to understanding that. Look, I'm an absolutely god awful defender, but I can improve my defensive ability by 5% simply by like executing well. And so like that's, and like you can apply this to all the Bucks players, like they can get 5% better at these coverages just by committing to being switched on about what they're doing.
We won't talk too much more about Bobby because that'll be for the rest of the season. The thing about Bobby too, like the way you said it, he's a hedge big. He'll like get so hyped up to be the hedge guy. He's like, I'm going to bottle this up. Then that kills him every single time. And also when he does turn to get back to his defender, he takes like the path of most resistance. It takes him like a half second to turn and realize like, oh, where's my guy, to identify where he needs to go in the first place. So it's like, part of it is like, he just gets so jacked. It's like, okay, I'm going to bottle up. And I think part of it too is like, not even a full switch. They were asking Bobby's like, hey, just buy guys like just a little bit of time.
Yes.
And this is was at the height of like Giannis was an absolute menace off ball. And it's just like, Bobby, buy us a second and we'll make it work with like PJ and Giannis or whatever. And now without that, it's like, Bobby, buy us a little bit of time, but also be good at getting back at your defender. And like you said, that specific lane for Bobby can be picked out for every single player on the roster who will be in the rotation. Like, here's your little thing that you need to do slightly better if the team is going to win. So it'll be curious. Go for it.
Yeah, and sorry, I just want to say I'm not trying to harp on Bobby Portis, but
I'll do it. It's fine. I'm happy to do it. Shout out to you, Bobby. Okay, let's do this then. Final question in the questionnaire here. Predict the teams finish in the East and how far they go in the playoffs. Don't worry about record or anything like that. Just compared to the rest of these, what you think the seed will be and how far you think they'll
go. Yeah, I think. I kind of like third, I suppose. Like, I think Boston will finish top. I don't really. I mean, you could convince me the Bucks will finish second if things go well. I think they'll probably be second or third. I don't really understand the Philly hype. I mean, their starting power forward is Caleb Martin. I mean, good luck.
Paul George is injured. Joel Embiid will not play back-to-backs.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, the media is the media fawning over Philly is kind of like, I don't really get that, but yeah, I think Boston will just do their Boston thing, and like the continuity might carry them to wins. New York, I mean, I think they're gonna miss like the supposed upgrade from DiVincenzo to Bridges. I think they could really end up missing DiVincenzo. Like, the amount of like tertiary offense that dude provided for them, like getting up a 3-pointer when they didn't have anything going, was like ridiculous last season. Like, I think, and then with the cat thing, like the cat thing, like they get, like, they had a team that was like so impenetrable defensively, and then with Cat, they just open up a whole bunch of things that you can do with him. So I'm actually kind of like a little bit relieved that they got Cat, because it gives teams a like an avenue to attack them,
someone to target.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'll go third, and then in the playoffs, I mean, again, like, I think this team can get into a conference finals with Boston. I absolutely believe that. And then in that case, like, they just have to, like, against Boston, they're going to switch everything. And I think in that case, like, just put Giannis in the post, and, Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, like, you're all too small. Like, I'm sorry, you're all too small. So I actually like Milwaukee's chances in a series against Boston. I mean, I'll be the optimist. I'll say they go to the finals.
Beautiful. No need to predict it.
I have to be the optimist.
Yeah, that's I appreciate that. I think the team is here. Frankly, the finals. It's cliche to say it's finals or bust, but realistically, yes, it's finals or bust. Like, could they go to the Eastern Conference Finals, and depending on how the series goes, everybody's like, okay, we're pretty close. But as we didn't talk about it too much here, but we've talked about with a lot of guests, the age question. Just, you push it another year, and so realistically, it's kind of a little bit of an now or never. So why not go to the finals and make something happen? I think that's a good way to go. I like to end on an optimistic note, Jack. This has been a lot of fun. All your questions, all your answers. I think it's a great start to hopefully a burgeoning podcast career ahead of you. But before I let you go, as with all guests who come onto this podcast, you are forced to submit a miscellaneous subject. We kind of picked our brains a little bit before the podcast. We ended on this, Tales from Basketball's Outback. So, we talked a little bit about the NBL, talked about the Next Stars program, but you're on the ground. You're living Australian basketball. I think this segment throughout the season will be you kind of giving us updates on what's latest and greatest, what's interesting going on in Australian basketball, whether it be the NBL or beyond. So please take it away. What's keeping your interest right now in the NBL?
Yeah. So, in the NBL, I mean, my team that I live in South Australia. The team is the Adelaide 36ers. Very interesting start to the season. They had a very eventful off season. They hired a club legend as the interim coach at the end of last season, and then signed him to a 2-year deal, and then they basically fired him 6 weeks before the season started because they thought they had a better assistant coach in who was in Mike Wells, who is now the head coach. And you see this in the American media, but the Australian media has been really hoping this team crashes and burns, just because of all the juicy stuff that's going to come out of that. And they are 3-3 so far, but they have played a very tough schedule. They have Bucks fan favorite Montrezl Harrell has just signed for the rest of the year, and they've got a pretty talented outfit. I think they might be like 4th or 5th or 6th or something. This team has been under a lot of pressure too. They've had in past seasons, they've paid a lot of money on this team, and the it's kind of just been a shit show from top to bottom in terms of recruitment and coaching and whatnot. So they've kind of been looked at as like the laughing stock of the league for a while now. And I think with this season, everyone's just hoping, all right, can we just make the finals? And I'm trying to think of any other players on the Sixers that people might know. I don't think there are too many, but in terms of who's leading the league, you've got your Melbourne United are always very good. Sydney are always very talented, and then Illawarra, which is like in New South Wales, it's like probably an hour from Sydney. I'm not too sure, but I think they might be top of the league as well. So them and Melbourne United top of the league, but I mean, hopefully when we chat next, Adelaide will have like maybe they're couple games over 500, let's hope they're in the top 4 or something. But yeah, I'm desperately hoping for a 36ers finals this year.
I will say, so I'm reading the article around Scott Ninnis getting let go. The line here that's killing me: Ninnis was informed of the decision on Monday morning, sources said, with the players told shortly after. The 36ers had a practice immediately after the players were informed. That's awesome. They said, kick rocks, dude, and then everybody hit the gym. We're gonna keep working. That's awesome. And that's the kind of organizational dysfunction that I really, really appreciate. It's what a world. The fact that they get the guy, sign him, he's a club legend, and then they fire him anyhow. He must have butted heads with management, but then why would they have brought him in the first place? I guess it's just it's very curious.
Yeah. So I should say so he took over and he had like maybe like a slightly positive record in the final few games. They didn't make the finals, and then in the off season, now that the owners cited the fact that they wanted a coach that was meeting they said that he wasn't meeting the standards of like recruitment and like off-season work in terms of like the amount of like effort they wanted to see the coach put in. I'm not entirely sure what that entails. Frankly, the ownership wanted to hire the guy Brian Gorgian, who was he's the Boomers coach for the past I don't know, probably like five years, I think. And they wanted to hire him, and he was interested in the job, but there was a lot of the players on the Sixers wanted Ninnis, and so I don't think the ownership was ever that in on Ninnis to start with. So it's kind of like when the NBA teams get a new general manager and front office, and then the rookies that were drafted by the previous regime inevitably all get traded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah. Let's hope for a good 36ers season this year.
And my final question for the Bucks fans who will inevitably now become 36ers fans as you proselytize here. Any other players besides Montrezl Harrell that people should keep an eye out on? Anybody who's like the name people not that they would recognize, but like should keep an eye on? Who's the best?
Yeah. So they have Kendrick Davis. He's an American. He played I believe he played his college ball with the Memphis Tigers, and he played last year with the Santa Cruz Warriors. He is an absolute bucket on offense, and they are just like, dude, play a lick of defense. Like, just play just a lick. He is he's not a good defender. And then their other good player is Dejan Vasiljevic, and he spent, I think he signed an Exhibit 10 with the Washington Wizards a few seasons ago. They let him go. So he's kind of the extent of his NBA. His NBA experience is sort of limited, but he is like a shooter, kind of come off screens. So they have a very high-powered offensive team, and then obviously everyone knows about Montrezl Harrell, so he's the other guy.
Fascinating. Well, that's great. I'm really looking forward to this.
They have Isaac Humphries. They have Isaac Humphries, who spent a little bit of time with the Atlanta Hawks. Way back, this was probably like back in 2018. So he would be the only other NBA guy that people might recognize the name, I think.
It looks like he also had a cup of coffee with maybe the Magic too, or at least he was part of their G League setup. I don't know if he actually ever made it up to the Magic themselves, but okay. Interesting. Well, I'm looking forward to this segment. I'm looking forward to not just 36ers updates, but kind of keeping us informed, because basketball is global, and Australia is a pretty large component of it. The Aussie to NBA pipeline is alive and well. We look forward to those updates. Like I said, this has been a lot of fun, Jack. I appreciate you making the time. We look forward to having you on the podcast throughout the season. Why don't you go ahead, if you want to plug any sort of social media places, if you want to be found on social media, this is the time to do it. Please go ahead.
My Twitter is just Jack Trehearne, just one word, capital J, capital T. Sometimes I post like Bucks, like a cool set they run, or some random NBL set that I think is a cool thing. Don't post too often, but yeah, you can find me there if you want.
Wonderful. And I know we'll be looking forward to your analysis of the team over at Brewhoop all season long, where you, the listener, the viewer, can find all of our analysis on the Milwaukee Bucks pre-game, post-game, during game, between games, Monday morning media roundup, Wednesday weekly wrap-up, other recurring segments throughout the season, and of course here at Deer Diaries, once a week, every week. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. I'm sure if you like Bucks basketball, you have other people in your life who like Bucks basketball. Why not share the gift of Deer Diaries with them? We appreciate your listening, and we will talk to you again very soon.